I took this, and let's just assume this was a solid board, okay? So before I put my pattern on, I sanded this smooth. Then I put my pattern on, okay? Then I went to the drill press, or in my case, I went over here, and this is my drill press, okay? Can you see that over there? Good for you? What this is by Seiko, and what's nice about it, it's unlimited in where I can go. Oh, I'm sorry. Unlimited where I can go, okay? And what this does is basically, it basically is a drill. It's a plunge type drill. And you can also take a Dremel. Yes. You can also take a Dremel and go buy, you buy, this is the Dremel, and you can buy this, which is basically a drill press thing. It'll do the same thing. What's cool with this one is you just go here, I turn it on, and I go through. Now, don't know why I say this, but make sure you create yourself a nice thick substrate, especially if you're doing it on a workbench or a table. I won't say why.
I did on my workbench. I got holes all in it.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so that works fairly well. If you only have a hand drill and that's all you got, then maybe mount a level on it or something, and you want it to go, because you want that hole to be straight through. Because if you got, this one probably wouldn't be too bad, but if you had some lines that were really close together, if you're not drilling it at a straight down, it's going to go sideways, and so it's going to go into the next thing. So when you get done, you're going to have at least a ruined one. You're going to ruin it because it won't go. So that's why you got to saw at a straight level. Okay, now I have taken this and I've drilled all these holes. And you say, well, okay, that's not a problem. Well, it is a problem because, remember, I sanded this side, I didn't sand the back side. There was a reason, because I'm leaving the back side. Now pretend this is a solid board, it wouldn't have the tape on it, okay? When I make that drill, no matter how well my backing is or how well my piece is here, okay? It's going to leave a little bit of a, that it came out, okay? And you say, well, that's not a big deal. It is, because what it'll do is when you're trying to saw, you got that many holes, it'll catch on the table. It'll drop in that hole, and then you don't get a smooth cut. So what I do is after I drill it, then I sand that so all of those are flush. Another reason, it's easier to put a blade through a clean hole than it is one that has stuff around the sides. Here's, for instance, here, this is my favorite. This is doing three-dimensional. So here's a feather, okay? That's looking down at the feather. That's the other feather, okay? What I really want out of this is the center, because it's a three-dimensional object is what I want, okay? Now, if I am going to saw this, what I do, this is my personal preference. You can do it my personal preference is I am going to saw that. I'm going to saw out all the inside holes, okay? Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to saw this. The reason being is twofold for me. Number one, it's thicker. It doesn't have any saw kerfs in it yet, so it's only one piece, okay? Versus if I cut this, it's now two pieces I got to go together, and it's going to move on me. But I'll saw this, and once that's sawed, I will cover it with packing tape. Now the reason I use packing tape is twofold. Number one, it holds it together, and it also lubricates the blade when I'm sawing on hard woods. Now, if you're stupid like me, you tell everybody that, and then after you saw a while, why is that burning? Every time I saw that cherry, it's burning or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Stupid, use some packing tape on it. So if you're sawing a hardwood and it's hard or it's thick or whatever, put a couple layers of packing tape on top of it. Because it is oil-based, it's not going to do anything. But there's another little twist. What you need to do is put the packing tape on before you drill the holes. Okay? So that way it goes through the packing tape. Otherwise, you got the hole and you can't get it in. Now you can, the blade's got enough thing on it, but you can push it in, okay? Now, somebody said at the show, how often you break blade. Okay, let's see, where else was I going to go? Okay, here's another thing. We're going to hypothetically, okay? Now, George, excellent sawer, okay? But, over here, Dan says, George says, it's got to be the saw. That saw is just not working right. It's continually, I can't get the pieces out. It's not sawing straight, but it's got to be the saw because, it's just got to be the saw. Well, Dan tells George, well, George, you're probably pushing it. George says, no way. I would know if I'm pushing it. I would really know if I'm pushing it, okay? So they separate. George goes home, and then George is thinking, saying, maybe I'm pushing it. Okay? So this is a way to test it if you're pushing it. I call this the X-ray of scroll sawing that you can do in your own shop, and you're the only one that knows, okay? So what you do is you take a playing card, which I didn't bring, so I'm using a business card. What I've done is I put a small hole in the center of that playing card, okay? Then what I do is I raise my saw up, I put it through the hole, I tighten the blade. Okay, now my blade is tight. Okay, so I've got a blade through that playing card. Okay, then I come over here and I take blue tape and I tape that playing card down on one side and I tape that playing card down on the other side. Okay, and if you got a big, you could put it all sides if you wanted to. Okay, now what you do in the privacy of your own shop, okay, what you can do is, okay, Dan told me I was pushing it. I know I'm not pushing it, okay? So now you turn your saw on, because the playing card's not gonna make a whole lot of difference. See, I told Dan I'm not pushing it. See, that hole's still there. Can you see it yet? I can't. I'm holding the saw. You see what I'm saying? It's exactly that hole is not changed. Okay? So now I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit here. Let's see if I can do it here now. Okay? Yeah, I know I'm not pushing it. I told Dan I wasn't pushing it. I know I'm not pushing it. I know doggone well I'm not pushing it. Ooh. See the difference? But what I'm saying, and sometimes, to be honest with you, I've seen it where it's been way up in the 1 o'clock. I've seen people where it's been dead sideways. I mean, they're pushing. See, what you need to do is, it's three things. You got three things you got to think of. You got the type of wood you're using, the saw blade you're using, and the other factor is your feed rate. So we saw what it was. So if I've got this, now this is oak or pine or whatever, it's going to change, okay? Like that rotary wheel is oak. But see, if I come in here and do this, as long as all three of those are in sync, okay, now I've got to make a turn. To make a turn, what I'm going to do, this is not a spiral blade, it's a flat blade. So what I'm going to do is basically, I'm going this way, okay, as an individual, as this blade, okay, I'm cutting this way, and now I want to make a turn in this direction. So with my saw, what I'm going to do is basically stop in place and move around and let the saw blade cut my circle around to that next location where I'm going to go, okay? And so that's what you're doing. So you're going to slow up. You didn't like that one? You're laughing over there. But you remember that, see? You will remember. But then see, the other side of the coin is another good cut that people have a hard time doing is a cut that looks like this. Okay? Those are always pains. It wouldn't be in the end of the board. Normally it'd be someplace else, but I'm making it in the end of the board, okay? So what you can do on those is, what I'm going to do, I could, in theory, I could bring the saw blade here, cut to the bottom, bring the saw blade here and cut to the, but I'm going to pretend this is in the middle, okay? So it's not that, it's not, I just can't do this, okay? So what you do is, okay, the thickness of this blade, the width of this blade, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down. Okay, one other thing, I'm going to assume that this right here is waste, okay? I could have the waste out here depending on my pattern, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to the bottom of my triangle. Now I'm at the bottom of my triangle. Now what I want to do is I want to go one blade length further down. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is come up, turn into my waist, then come back down into that one blade length I went, and then come back out. Now what that will do is give me a straight bottom. Does everybody understand that, or I need to do it one more time? Everybody got? But I'm saying you can do that in any cut that's got a big point like that, is if you go in, but what you got to do is think to yourself, okay, where's the waist? Because you can see, it's hard to see, maybe, hard to see on the waist, because I turned the blade into the waist, it's cutting and it's going to ruin that piece, but you got to know where the waist is. It may be on the outside, may be on the inside. You just have to decide what to do. If I was going to keep this, I would have said the waist was here and here and turned to one of those sides, and I get the same thing. Okay?
Hans, why did you go further? You said when you got to the point, you said you got to go a little further. Why did you do that?
Because what that does, okay, good question. So I've got this, and I'm here, and I want that. I want that, okay? Okay. If I don't, what I want to do is I want to go that one blade further. Okay? Because I want this, okay? And if I'm coming down this way, okay, and I only go to here, I don't go that one extra blade width, okay? When I turn and then I back into this spot, my blade is going to be right here, and it won't be at the bottom of that triangle, so I can start straight up on that line. Because what I'm doing is I come down here and my blade is cutting this direction. Okay? And I go down and go out. I go down an extra width of the blade. Then I back that blade out. This is my waist. So what I do is I take that blade which is cutting this way, I turn it into this and come back down. So now my cutting teeth are here, and I back down into that cut, and then I go straight up that direction. Everybody got that? But it makes that cut so much easier. Now, if you haven't cut in a while, or you want to cut in whatever, and you're having opportunities, and I have what I call the 3 P's, which are persistence, patience, and practice. Okay? Now, if you're having trouble cutting these type items like this, or you're having problems cutting scallops, okay? My suggestion is go out to Steve Good's website, okay? Steve Good is a pattern maker. I forgot, I didn't say. Steve Good is a pattern maker. If you go out to Steve Webb and put Steve Good and go out there and put Steve Good scroll saw, you'll get out there. Sign up for his newsletter, and what he does, and ultimately what will happen is you will get 3 to 5 patterns a week that he will send you via email. They are free, and you know, you might like one of them out of those 5. But he has 3,000 patterns out there. You can go to his catalog and you say, oh, I've got a friend, he's a Navy officer, and I'd like to have something about military. I'd like to have military. So you can put military as a lookup search and go out to his thing, and I bet you'll find 10 or 12 items that are military based. Oh, he's Navy, so I can get that Navy one and do it, and you download the pattern, it's on your computer, and you can print as many copies as you want. Now, if you want, at some point in time, you feel comfortable or whatever, you can send him a donation if you'd like. That's how he's functioned for a long period of time. Just the nicest guy you could stay. But anyway, so go out to Steve Good's site. I call them baskets. Sometimes he calls them bowls. So either go a search on baskets or bowls, and what happens is you can take a piece of wood that's this big, okay, and you put the pattern on here, okay? And to make this basket, I said you were having problems with cuts like this. Let's say that cut was just driving you nuts, okay? Or this cut was driving you nuts. You know, you're having hard. I mean, I got circles here, but I don't mean to do that. But those two cuts were. I mean, those cuts were causing you all kinds of problems. So what you do is go out, and he has patterns for a scallop bowl, and or a angled bowl, or different things. And then what you do is you put the pattern on this, and you say, well, okay, that's no big deal. It is, because to make the bowl work, you've got to go around 7 different times with those type of cuts. And then what you do is shift them, and then you make this basket. And as bad as you saw, it'll always come out. And the only reason I say that, I was teaching, last time I taught, somebody, you know, I told them to follow the line, but they cut through the second line, and, you know, whatever it is. But we still got the basket together. When we took the pattern off, nobody knew any better. We put the basket together, and it came out. And as a new scroller, it's always great for the ego, is if you can cut it and glue it up, and you come out with a finished product, and you can take it upstairs and show it to your significant other or whatever. She thinks it's gorgeous, and you know all the mistakes that are in it, but you don't tell. Okay? Both ways. But I'm just saying, that gives you one of the 3 P's, which is called practice. That'll allow you to practice those cuts, okay? So that's very handy to do. Yes, sir?
How do you decide how fast to run your blade? What speed?
Okay. If you're George or myself, let's assume this runs to 10. We would both like it to run twice as fast as it is. My judgment is twofold. Number one, let's see if I can do it. Number one, most scroll sawers make the mistake of doing this. Okay? This is top speed right now, and for some reason this saw, I think, has a bad bearing in it somewhere, okay? But most new scrollers say, oh, I can't handle this. This is way too fast. So what they do is they go like about right here. And then all I get in emails is, why is my thing bouncing so much? It won't cut a thing. I can't control it at all. See, going too slow sometimes is worse than going too fast. But if I was a new sawer, probably on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably maybe go 3/4 speed. Now, the harder the wood, sometimes the slower the speed. You want to go a little slower because what you want to do is you want to give the saw blade time to clear the sawdust out of that cut. Now, if you control the wood, the blade, and the amount you push it in, then you're going to allow for that, so that's not a problem. If he's sawing this Intarsia, he's probably at top speed most of the time. Maybe he slows up a little bit when he's doing the things for the ornaments, and I know he and Marcus both, and I do too, is that speed right there is perfect. It's perfect for one thing. It's perfect for sawing quarters and $half and stuff with jeweler's blade, because the biggest opportunity for a scroll saw blade is heat, and you don't want a whole lot of buildup of heat. Okay, now, this saw, the Seiko saw, Excalibur, and all of them have one opportunity. You break blades. You're really not breaking blades. What you're doing is, if you're doing something that has 50 inside cuts, and you're taking that blade, and you've got, here's your blade, this is our fictitious blade, and this is this screw. So what you're doing is, it can be top or bottom, it doesn't make any difference, okay? But every time you put that blade in, you run it through the hole, and then you attach the blade, you screw that thing into that side of the blade. You screw it into the side of the blade. You screw it into the side of the blade. Every time you screw it into the side of the blade, you are putting a little bit of a dent. So what you're basically doing is what do you call it when you're trying to break something?
Metal fatigue.
Metal, and so what happens, then it breaks up there. Sometimes you can put it back in, most of the time it's like, you can throw it out. The other thing I say, if the blade is smoking or it's not cutting well, hey, blades are cheap. The project you're doing, don't ruin your project by using a blade that's not sharp. Other thing is, use your hearing. Use your hearing. If it's doing that, I think there's something loose, because it should be just as, it shouldn't sound any different than that right there. I mean, it should be even at high speed. I run mine high. Like I said, there's something wrong in this a little bit. Okay. The other side of the coin is foot switch. Okay. One thing, especially if you got DeWalt's are notorious for this switch going out. Okay. So some people here, a lot of people, like to use what's called a dead man. Dead man means I have my foot on it, the saw runs, when my foot's off, it stops. I don't like that personally, because I don't want to have my foot in the same spot hours after hours after hours, okay? Because I like to turn the saw on with an on-off switch, and then I may curl my foot behind my chair. If you can saw by sitting in a chair if it's down that way. You can saw in a stool. As you saw me this weekend, I saw in a drafting chair. I put all my controls on the beam here, and that's what I use. He uses a dead man switch, but what he's done, he's put this in a block of wood so it's in a comfortable position for him, and he has it right there, and that's how he saws. It's what you get used to. My reasoning for an on-off switch, well, it's not safe. I'm saying this saw is safe anyway, but if I have an on-off switch and for some reason I can't reach it, what do you think they made this switch for? That was the original switch that the manufacturer put in. So that's an option you can put on it. It's good. The other thing you can do is a couple things. You can buy at the show, they had it. I think a couple people bought it. It's a product called Scrollnado. And what it does, it has a tube down here and a tube underneath, and then back here the tubes go together and you hook it to a vacuum cleaner or whatever, okay? You can also make you a T here, and you can take clear clear tubing and put it to where you want it here, and do the same thing on the bottom and make your own. Okay? What you want to do is just get it, attach it just behind that hole, and it's going to get rid of it. It gets rid of that dust. There is some fine dust. It's my personal opinion, if you're going to spend the time and effort to cut something, cut it, unless it's Christmas ornaments that are going to be this thin or whatever. And still, if I'm going to spend the time cutting it, cut it from real wood. Don't cut it from plywood. And the other side is, don't cut it from particle board. Particle board is one of the worst things to cut for a couple reasons. Number one, it is very dangerous from a standpoint because it's probably, what do you say, 60% glue, maybe 70% glue. And so if you're cutting particle board, you better have a mask on, okay? I'm just saying you got a mask on. That's another thing. If you're cutting, I don't use a mask, I'm bad. What I do though is I have airflow behind me that's pushing it that way, plus I'm using this to push it away from me. What I did is there are a couple ways. I've got a fancy suction fan that catches it, okay? But if you don't have that, what you do is get a very fine furnace filter, okay? And just attach it to a box fan. And just have the box fan blowing out of the thing. That brings up another question. Somebody says, oh, I can go out and buy that thing that's right behind him right there, which is a sealing thing which takes the dust out of the air. One thing, they work great, but do not install it right here. Because what it's doing, it's bringing all the dust right above you all the time. You want to put it on one end or the other to take it away from you. I'm trying to cover all the little pieces. The other things are lifts. This is a lift, this is a spring lift, okay? What that does is, in theory, it holds up this blade. In theory, okay? Now, there's two ways you can do that. I guess I'll do it with this. Worst case scenario, you can always use a 2x4. That gives you the ability to do this, okay? So you can put your blade in, okay? Now, if I'm putting the blade in, and I'm bringing the blade, okay, also I'm going to show you one other thing. See this blade on the end? See how it's crooked? Okay, that means that underneath I've got an opportunity. What I've got is I've got the blade holder, okay? Which looks like that, and it's kind of open, okay? And I got another one over here. Okay? Over here, I've got my screw, okay? On this side, what I've got is, I call it an anvil. And what it is, it comes in, it's inside of here, okay? Okay? What you want is you want that anvil extended, so in theory, when you put this blade in, that anvil, and when this screw is done there, that blade is in the center between those blade clamps, okay? What's happened here, I'm willing to guess, is what happened is this anvil is not here, that anvil is not there, that anvil is there. It's inside of that hole. So when I bring this blade against there, what's happening, it's bending that blade. And that's why I'm getting that. The only reason I say that, that's the second one that's come out of there like that. I took the one out that was in it from the show. So it's just a matter of taking that and putting it in. Well, yes and no. If I screw that back in, vibration in a little bit, it'll be back out. So what you want to use is you want to use temporary blue Loctite. That temporary Loctite keeps it from coming out, keeps it from vibrating out. So it'll stay in a lot better. The same is true for the screw on this one up here. The knobs, these are aftermarket accessories we've got on them. A guy named Marcus makes them. If you want them, he has somebody that makes them. What it does, it makes it easier to tighten up. If you don't have this knob, it make you a notch board like that, which in turn will go on there, which will give you, this is 3/4 or an inch wide, and you can just go in there and use it to tighten it up, okay? Then, if that's what you're going to do, then I suggest right here, drill a hole right there, and just drill it in a little ways, and then put you a magnet in there. And then what you can do is just take it and just put it right here on the side, so you'll always have it when you're ready. So that's one way to do it. I did it for a long period of time. And that's one way to tighten it up, because I don't care how often you do this. These your fingers get really sore, and the older you get, it gets super hard to do it. Let's see. So this is one method. You can do the old-fashioned method. You can take a 4x4. There are different mechanisms that hook and come off in different ways. And if you were at the wood show, you'll see what I did is I took an angle from here, from these two screws, went up, brought it up to here, so I was at least 3/4 of the way down here, because that's the lifting power. I put a pulley here, grabbed this head, came down to here to another pulley, came to another pulley here, and then went to a foot pedal. So what I do is loosen it up, push down on my foot pedal, and I got both hands free. Okay? And that's just using what I call garage door cables. So that works really well. If somebody wants to get a picture of it, I can give them a picture of it if they want it. This way, when I use my foot, I now have this with my foot. And it's always dead down because it's gravity fed. And I've got one hand to hold my piece. And okay, that's what I didn't mention. I'm a top feeder, so I'm feeding this direction, okay? And I'm going through my hole. And I'm having a hard time finding my hole because I only got that little hole, okay? This clamp is no different than the one on the bottom. So now, you find it. Take a picture where can you take a picture where my finger is underneath? You probably can't get down there.
You can't get down there.
But yeah, thank you.
You said, don't drop it.
Yeah. See where my finger is? I can't. What I do is I basically underneath, I've taken my thumb and put the teeth into my thumb, and I know exactly where this is on the bottom. So I can just basically very quickly, once you get top feed, you can go like this, and then I take my fingernail and pull down on one of the teeth so I make sure it's down. And see, I'm there. Now, if you are a bottom feeder, 20% of us are top feeders, 80% are bottom feeders, and there's a little bit of a skew in that because there are some saws that will not allow you to top feed, okay? So if I'm a bottom feeder, what I'm doing is I got the blade like this. I want a bottom feed because the screw's right here and I can see exactly where it goes in, and it's so much easier. But it's not, because to me, that's my hole. I'm going to pretend this is my hole. To get it in that hole, I basically got to stand on my head like this and get there to get it into that hole. Okay? That's why to me it's harder. But that's just my personal thing. Now, if you are a bottom feeder or your saw can only bottom feed, here's a little hint. Get an LED light and attach it underneath your saw so it shines through the hole. And what it'll do, it'll shine through your drill hole, and it'll make it easier to find when you're going up underneath. That's just one way to find it that way. When you're doing general scroll sawing, the line is only suggested line of travel. Because you're off just a little bit, okay? Here's the factor. You get done, saw your piece. I'm saying, not that far off, but I'm just saying if you're off the line a little bit. If you go off the line, let's say that's your line, okay? And you're cutting up here, and you come off over here. Well, hold on, let's do this. You're cutting here, and you come off right here. Do not do this. oh, I'm off the line. And just go straight back in. Okay? Don't do that. Come up here, and you're off the line. Just come up here. Okay? Oh, I'm off the line. Let's get back on the line. Okay? Because when you cut it. Okay? You know you went off the line. Okay? When you take the pattern off, nobody else knows except you. Okay? So that's one thing. Except if you're doing Intarsia. And when he does Intarsia, so he can see it real well and makes it easy, he prints his patterns out blue, right?
Red.
He does it in red. So that way he thin line. Very thin line. So that way, because if you use a black line and you're sawing and trying to really stay in the line, you've got a blade that's black and you've got a line that's black. That's another thing, is if you've got patterns, it's a lot easier to cut what I call thin line patterns versus thick line patterns that are this thick. You know, I'm saying even if they're as wide as that magic marker line right there, that would be a pain to cut because your blade is 1/10 of that. Okay, what side you're going to stay on? You know, left side, right side. You know, or a lot of patterns, they'll have a solid. It'll just be a solid black. Okay, where am I going to cut? You got to make your decision and develop your skill and say, okay, if it's solid black, I'm going to stay on the outside edge. But once the pattern's off and you complete it, you are the only one that knows that it's not there, that you went out of the line or whatever and finished it, okay? But you know, you can print your own patterns out. It's handy to download patterns. It's handy to scan them or whatever, because then you have them. That's my problem right now. I probably got 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 patterns, and trying to find one sometimes can be a pain in the butt. And you know, no matter how you do it. I mean, a lot of times what I did back in the old days when I started, they were all paper patterns. Okay, and if you got paper patterns, the problem is, I don't know how I know, but you accidentally put the original on a thing and you cut it out and then you never find it again. So what I did is I took all my paper patterns that I have, if I have an original, I take it and I take a yellow magic marker and across it I put a yellow line. So I know that's an original and I don't touch it. I make sure that I make a copy of it. That's just my internal thing, because it's so easy. Somebody says, oh, I need you to make a dachshund dog for me, can you? Oh yeah, I got one. I go in and here's a pattern, I grab it. Oh, that was I forgot. I took it to the copy machine and I took it out and I took all of them down to the shop. You know, and now, oh, I got one right here. So I started cutting on it and then, then I went to look for dachshund later on and I don't have it. So it's an opportunity to deal with. Another thing is Marcus and George came up with this little thing.
Markers.
Okay, what this is basically they raised their saw up. They had to add a block right here underneath this piece, and they created this because it's raised up. And then this is laminate. Okay, and what they did, this is helpful for two reasons. It catches some of the sawdust, so it's not over the thing, but for Marcus and George and those people who have it, what it was for is they are doing, i.e., they're cutting those dots for that tiger over there. And you know, some of those dots, sometimes they forget to not have a zero clear. Oh, it's no big deal. And it goes through the hole. And if they don't have this on the bottom, it goes on the floor, and there's other things on the floor called sawdust. And a magnet doesn't help them find that piece. And it's the last piece of that colored wood that they had. So they kind of use this to catch their things. They also can put blades down here. They can also, if you're sawing, and these are the pieces you're cutting. I cut this. Never ever do this. I cut this, and this is a single piece, and just go like this. And then cut the next piece and put it up there. Don't put your finished product on your table. Because eventually what's going to happen, it's going to vibrate down here, and you could reach for it, or it gets back in the blade, or falls on the floor. So you could cut the pieces. If you don't have any other place, you can put them down there and then pick them up when you're done. Now in Marcus and George, when they're doing Intarsia, what they're doing is they've got, in their case, let's just hypothetically, there's 5 different woods in that piece he's doing, okay? So what he's done is he's created 5 different pages of patterns. One for oak, one for walnut, one for cherry, one for whatever, whatever, okay? And that way he can place it on the wood. Like I said, because he used the clear stuff, he can tape, when he puts them on and he can see what's under the wood, he can align the grain if it's a hair, so he can see through, and that's why it's nice to be able to clear, so you can put it down and get grain direction and that stuff right. Because he makes these patterns, he may put an arrow and say, okay, I want all the grain for this to go this way. Or if it's a main, he wants to make sure all those pieces. So then what he does is he will take all those pieces, and every one of the pieces is numbered, and every one of the numbers is also on a solid pattern of the completed thing. He saws that piece, and it goes in that place. He saws the next piece, and it goes on that piece and a table behind him. Is that right? Not Joe? So that, because like I said, when you get 220 pieces, you don't want to spend 2 or 3 days putting your puzzle together. Okay? And you're saying, I know I sawed that right. And every once in a while, sometimes the numbers come off, or when you're sanding or whatever, something happens, you bump it, and it still takes a while to get all those pieces to line up correctly. So that's another thing.
Is there an easy way to tell if the blade's right side up or upside down?
My easiest way is if you take the blade. Now, if you buy Flying Dutchman blades now, okay, currently, okay, Flying Dutchman was pretty smart when they made them, is the blade is like this. If you take your hand and go up the non-blade side and you go to the top, there's a little notch on the top. And this blade right here has it, and you'll feel it. That means the blade normally, except for the puzzle thing we were talking about, is going to be, this is going to go in your top. And that will put, now, I've sawed enough or whatever, I can take my finger and go across the teeth and go like this and go this way and say, oh, there's more teeth one way or the other. I can tell in a blade that's got teeth going both directions. In this case, this one, every 4th tooth is going up. So feel that, because that makes a big difference. Okay, the other thing, when you're sawing, okay, the closer you get to the blade, okay, or let's just say, when you're turning, the pivot point, the perfect pivot point is that blade, okay, where that blade is, okay? So the closer you can get to that blade, the more you can control that pivot place, okay? You say, well, I don't like to get that close. Except if you are using spiral blades, I'm spending 90% of my time behind the blade. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to get cut. But I'm saying the closer you can get, I'm saying you don't want to do this. This is tough. If you're sitting out here and trying to do like this because you can't control, you're better off to control it this way. Control it in close, so you can do it. That makes it easier to control. Practice, patience, persistence. You've got to do it. And if you don't do it all the time, do it. And then, like I said, get a book like this. And like I said, it helps you follow through the different things. All of my exercise, like this one, okay, you say, okay, this is nothing odd. Yes, it is, because what they're doing is they're stack cutting. But what they're stack cutting is 25 sheets of writing paper. And so they're making a cat. So they're making somebody cat stationary. So you're cutting out of paper. Remember, if you go on the website, I've got I've got 35 YouTube videos out there right now. Nothing I do at home. Okay, here's an exercise. Remember I said you might want to change your angle of the table. Well, you got to do it in this case. Come on. Because this is what we're making. Okay? So this part up here, this part will be flat. It's got to be 90 degrees, so you create this. But when you get down here, what you're doing is starting here, and you're going around and around and around and around and around and around and around. Because when you're done, you want that piece to fall down, gravity to fall it down, but each piece is going to get caught about 3/4 of the way down, so it becomes a basket, and you can't push it down. But then you can push up from the bottom and fold it, and it becomes a flat basket, if you've ever seen that. That's the nice part about this book. It does, here's a basket. You can make this. Well, that's more than 2 inches high. How do you do that? Well, what you're doing is taking this pattern right here, and you got to make 3 of these. You've got to make 3 of these, and you got to make 1 of these, and you got to make 1 of those, and 1 of those. Stack cut, stack cut. That's not a real difficult cut, so you should be able to cut it. Slow your speed down, okay? And then what you do is you put 1 of these, 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 and then what happens is you get the effect like this. It looks like you have a woven basket. Okay? So that's what I'm just saying. This one gives, and here's just, making puzzles. If you have kids or whatever, you can just make puzzles out of it. This is a bear. Here's an example. If you want to do this, is what we did all weekend. Nobody used this pattern because they all cut them freehand. If you wanted 8 pieces, they did 8 pieces. If you wanted 12 pieces, but I'm saying, if you don't feel comfortable, you can paste that on the back of that puzzle, turn your blade around, and you can cut a picture puzzle that has, in this case, 8. So you got 40-piece puzzle when you get done on that size. Now, this is segmentation, just a simple segmentation, nothing hard. Here's another basket. But the thing is, this will basically take you through. I'm trying to find one more of my favorite pattern in here. This is my favorite pattern. When you do it the first time, it's called a bow pattern. Okay? It's a 3-dimensional pattern. So what you do is you put this on one face, you put that on the other face, you drill a hole, cut those out, cut that out, tape it back together, cut it again, and you've got a 3-dimensional hair bow. And when it's done, you say, how did I cut that? That's my favorite to cut. It's the most fun. One last question from anybody? Anybody got anything? Did I do okay? What do we need? Any questions? I'm sorry for those that are the good sawers and scrollers and it's kind of boring. I apologize, but have fun. The key thing is practice, practice, practice. Make some sawdust and challenge yourself. And also, if I have one thing, is if you haven't sawed much or you go down every so often, do a practice sheet on what you're going to cut. It makes a big difference. But thank you.